The text glowed on my screen. "My mom is inviting you to dinner today." I stared at my fiancé's message, my stomach knotting instantly. One day before our wedding, and suddenly his mother wanted a private dinner? After 2 years of cold shoulders and barely concealed disapproval, this last-minute invitation felt like a trap. But I loved Daniel, and tomorrow I would become his wife. So I typed back I'd love to, while wondering what his mother, the formidable Victoria Bennett, could possibly want from me now. I met Daniel Bennett at a gallery opening 3 years ago. My friend had dragged me there, insisting I needed to get out more, after spending months buried in translation work. As a professional translator specializing in Romance languages, I had a tendency to lose myself in work, especially when a challenging project came along. That night, I was mentally exhausted after finishing an Italian literary translation that had consumed my life for weeks. "You need to talk to actual humans, not just books," Tara had insisted, practically forcing me into a dress. I was studying a particularly perplexing modern art piece, tilting my head and wondering if I was supposed to understand what looked like random paint splatters, when a deep voice beside me said, "I think it's upside down." When I turned, I found myself looking up at Daniel Bennett, tall, with warm brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled, and a quiet confidence that didn't seem forced. He wore a simple navy suit that looked tailored to his broad shoulders. "Are you sure?" I asked, squinting at the canvas. "Not at all," he laughed. "But that's my theory, and I'm sticking to it." From that first conversation, something clicked. We talked for hours that night, moving from the gallery to a small cafe across the street. Daniel was smart, funny, and refreshingly down-to-earth for someone from his background. He worked as an architect at a prestigious firm, designing sustainable buildings that were both beautiful and environmentally conscious. Our whirlwind romance progressed quickly. Within 6 months, I was spending most nights at his sleek downtown apartment. At 1 year, he gave me a key. And on our second anniversary, under the stars at the botanical garden where we'd had our 3rd date, he knelt down and asked me to be his wife. The only shadow on our happiness was Daniel's family, particularly his mother, Victoria Bennett. The Bennetts were old money, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew. Daniel's father, James, had expanded the family's investment firm, while Victoria maintained their social standing with ruthless precision. They lived in a sprawling estate in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city, complete with manicured gardens and a staff that had been with them for generations. From our first meeting, Victoria had made it abundantly clear that I was not what she had envisioned for her son. She'd been polite, of course, in that icy way that conveyed disapproval without ever saying anything directly insulting. "So, you're a translator? How? Interesting. I suppose there must be some demand for that sort of thing." Throughout our relationship, Victoria frequently mentioned Ashley, Daniel's ex-girlfriend. Ashley, the cardiothoracic surgeon from a good family. Ashley, who understood the responsibilities of someone in Daniel's position. Ashley, who had apparently been perfect in every way except for the minor detail that Daniel hadn't loved her. Now, here I was, the day before our wedding, staring at my phone and trying to figure out what Victoria could possibly want. I was applying mascara when my phone buzzed with a notification. It was from the florist we'd hired for the wedding. Miss Bennett asked us to change the arrangements to include more lilies. "Wanted to confirm this works with you?" I frowned. Victoria had been doing this throughout the planning process, trying to take control of decisions that should have been ours. We'd settled on a simple, elegant arrangement of garden roses and eucalyptus, specifically avoiding lilies because my best friend was allergic to them. I quickly called the florist back and politely but firmly explained that there had been no change to our original order. As I hung up, another message came through, this time from the caterer, asking about Victoria's request to add shellfish to the menu, despite our explicit instructions about a guest's severe allergy. My hands shook slightly as I typed a response, reiterating our original menu choices. This was too much of a coincidence. Victoria was deliberately going behind our backs, trying to change our wedding the day before the ceremony. When I called Daniel to tell him what was happening, he sounded tired. "I'll talk to her, Ivy. She probably just thinks she's helping." "Daniel, she knows about Jeremy's shellfish allergy. We discussed it during the tasting. This isn't helping. It's deliberate." There was a long pause on the line. "You're right. I'll handle it. And I'll see you tonight at dinner, okay? I love you." "I love you too," I replied, wondering if he would actually stand up to his mother this time. I spent the rest of the afternoon checking in with every vendor, confirming that all our original plans were still in place. By the time I started getting ready for dinner at Victoria's, I was exhausted and anxious. As I zipped up my navy blue dress, I tried to remind myself that after tomorrow, Victoria would be family. We would need to find a way to coexist peacefully, for Daniel's sake. My phone rang. It was Tara. "Are you really going to dinner at the Ice Queen's lair the night before your wedding?" she asked without preamble. "I don't have much choice," I sighed, putting her on speaker as I fixed my hair. "Just be careful, Ivy. That woman has never wanted this wedding to happen." "I know. But after tomorrow, she'll have to accept that it did." "Has Daniel told you why she suddenly wants this dinner?" "No, just that she insisted on seeing us before the wedding. Probably wants to make one last attempt to talk him out of it." Tara was quiet for a moment. "You know, my cousin works at their country club. She told me Victoria did something similar with Daniel's last serious girlfriend before Ashley. Invited her to a private lunch right before they were supposed to move in together. The girl left in tears, and they broke up the next day." My stomach dropped. "What did she do to her?" "No one knows exactly, but whatever it worked." After hanging up with Tara, I walked around Daniel's apartment, looking at the boxes we'd packed for our new place. We were supposed to move in after returning from our honeymoon in Greece. On his bookshelf, I noticed a photo album I'd never seen before. When I pulled it out, I found it filled with family photos, many featuring a younger Daniel with various women at family functions. What struck me was how few photos included the same woman twice, except for Ashley, who appeared in many pictures, always standing close to Victoria. I was returning the album when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Don't eat anything she offers you. She doesn't want this wedding to happen." I stared at the cryptic warning, my heart pounding. I tried calling the number back, but it went straight to an automated message saying the number was not in service. Was this someone trying to help me? Or was Victoria playing mind games? Either way, as I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, I knew this dinner would be anything but pleasant. The drive to Victoria's estate took 40 minutes, giving me plenty of time to rehearse potential conversations. I had planned responses for critiques of the wedding, for pointed questions about my career, even for not so subtle suggestions that I wasn't good enough for Daniel. What I hadn't prepared for was the cold knot of fear that settled in my stomach as I pulled up to the iron gates of the Bennett estate. The house looked even more imposing in the fading evening light. 3 stories of classic architecture, with perfectly trimmed hedges and a circular driveway centered around a fountain. Money and power were etched into every brick. A staff member appeared as soon as I parked, offering to take my keys and move my modest vehicle to a less visible location. Daniel met me at the door, kissing my cheek and whispering, "You look beautiful." He seemed tense, his usual easy smile replaced with something more strained. "Is everything okay?" I asked quietly. "Of course," he said too quickly. "Mom's just eager to have some family time before tomorrow." I wanted to point out that his definition of family seemed to exclude me most of the time, but I held my tongue. "Did you speak with her about the vendors?" He nodded. "All sorted out. Just a misunderstanding." Before I could press further, Victoria appeared in the entryway. At 58, she remained strikingly beautiful, With perfectly highlighted blonde hair, a slim figure maintained through rigorous diet and exercise, and the kind of posture that spoke of years of finishing school. "Ivy, darling, how lovely of you to join us," she said, air kissing near my cheeks. Her perfume was expensive and overwhelming. "I hope the traffic wasn't terrible." "Not at all, Mrs. Bennet. Thank you for inviting me." "Victoria, please. After tomorrow, we'll be family." The word family sounded like a foreign concept in her mouth. Daniel's sister Grace appeared behind her mother. At 32, Grace was the perfect Bennet offspring, having followed their father into finance and married a man from a similarly prestigious family. She had never bothered to hide her disdain for me. "Ivy," she said with a tight smile. "Interesting dress choice for the evening before your wedding." I glanced down at my navy dress, suddenly self-conscious. "Is there something wrong with it?" "Oh no," Grace replied. "It's just very practical. Most brides I know would be at a spa or having a special dinner with their bridesmaids." The implication was clear. Normal brides wouldn't be here, because normal brides would be welcome in their future family. Victoria smoothly interjected, "Let me show you some of our recent renovations while Daniel helps his father with something in the study." Before I could object to being separated from Daniel, he was already heading down a different hallway, leaving me alone with Victoria and Grace. The tour was clearly designed to intimidate. Victoria pointed out priceless artworks, antiques with historical significance, and family heirlooms that had been passed down for generations. "This vase is Ming Dynasty," she said, gesturing to a delicate blue and white piece, nearly 5 centuries old and incredibly fragile. "One must be so careful around these treasures." Her eyes lingered on me, the warning clear. I was the bull in her china shop. As we passed through the formal dining room where the table was being set, Victoria added, "We usually use the smaller dining room, but since this is a special occasion, I thought we'd use the formal setting." The chandelier was a gift from a genuine Italian count who was a dear friend of Daniel's great-grandfather. Each statement was designed to emphasize the lineage I didn't have, the history I couldn't match, the world I didn't belong in. By the time we reached the kitchen, I was mentally exhausted from the constant reminders of my outsider status. "And this is Carlo, our chef." Victoria introduced a middle-aged man in a crisp white jacket. "He's preparing a traditional family recipe tonight." "It's a pleasure," I said, extending my hand to Carlo. "The pleasure is mine," he replied, with a genuine smile that contrasted sharply with the cold reception from the Bennet women. As we left the kitchen, I caught a glimpse of a familiar name on Victoria's open tablet on the counter. Ashley. I slowed my pace, trying to see more without being obvious. Victoria quickly swept the tablet into her arms, but not before I saw enough of the message to understand that Ashley had confirmed attendance at something tomorrow. "Forgive me," Victoria said, noticing my gaze. "Just confirming some last-minute wedding details." "With Ashley?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Ashley is a family friend. I've invited her to the wedding as my special guest. I hope that won't be an issue." The calculated cruelty of inviting Daniel's ex-girlfriend to our wedding, without even mentioning it to us, left me momentarily speechless. Before I could respond, Grace chimed in. "Ashley was so disappointed when she couldn't attend the rehearsal dinner last night. She's been so supportive of the family since she and Daniel parted ways." I thought back to the mysterious text warning me about Victoria and wondered if it could have come from Ashley herself. Was this all an elaborate setup, or was there something more complicated happening? "I had no idea she was invited," I managed to say evenly. "Oh, I must have forgotten to mention it," Victoria replied, her tone making it clear the omission was intentional. "Now, shall we join the men in the drawing room for drinks before dinner?" As we walked through the grand hallway, I noticed a family portrait from what appeared to be a holiday gathering. Daniel stood beside Ashley, while Victoria had her arm linked with the younger woman's. The message couldn't have been clearer. Ashley belonged here. I did not. Thanksgiving at the Bennett estate last year had been a disaster. Victoria had seated me far from Daniel, peppered me with intrusive questions about my family's modest background, and made numerous references to Ashley's accomplishments. I had left feeling small and insignificant, while Daniel had insisted his mother was just trying to get to know me better. Now, as we entered the drawing room where Daniel stood with his father, I wondered if I was walking into a similar trap. James Bennett was a quieter presence than his wife, but no less intimidating. He looked up from his conversation with Daniel and nodded in acknowledgement of my presence without interrupting his sentence about some business matter. Victoria handed me a glass of white wine, a special vintage from a vineyard we own in Tuscany. Daniel tells me you appreciate Italian culture. I do, I replied cautiously. I've translated several Italian novels and poetry collections. How charming, she said dismissively. Though I imagine it's difficult to truly capture the nuance without the proper cultural context. Before dinner was announced, my phone buzzed in my purse. Excusing myself to the powder room, I checked the message. It was Tara again. How's it going? Do you need an emergency exit call? I typed back quickly. Victoria invited Ashley to the wedding tomorrow as her special guest. Tara's response was immediate. What? That's insane. Want me to create a scene and get her thrown out? Despite the tension, I smiled at the thought of my fiercely loyal friend causing chaos at the Bennett estate. Not yet, but stay on standby. Returning to the drawing room, I found Daniel engaged in what seemed like a serious conversation with his father. He barely looked up as I re-entered, and the growing sense that something was very wrong intensified. Dinner is served, announced the butler, and we processed into the formal dining room where crystal glasses glinted under the antique chandelier. Victoria had seated me directly across from her, with Daniel to my left and Grace to my right. The perfect position to be scrutinized throughout the meal. As the first course was served, I couldn't help but remember the anonymous warning. Don't eat anything she offers you. I watched as Victoria took the first bite of her salad, and only then did I cautiously taste mine. Is something wrong with your food, dear? Victoria asked, noticing my hesitation. Not at all, I replied, forcing a smile. Everything looks delicious. Carlo has been with us for 20 years, she continued. He trained at the finest culinary schools in Italy. So different from those trendy fusion places you and Daniel seem to prefer. And so began what would become the dinner from hell, with me as the main course. The elaborate Italian dinner proceeded with excruciating slowness. Each course was accompanied by Victoria's running commentary on family history, traditions, and expectations. What might have been interesting under different circumstances felt like a prolonged test I was destined to fail. The Bennett family can trace its lineage back to the Mayflower, Victoria informed me over the pasta course. Daniel's great-great-grandfather established the family business during the Industrial Revolution. Proper bloodlines and suitable matches have always been important to maintaining our legacy. I nodded politely, wondering if she realized how archaic she sounded. My family doesn't have quite such extensive records, but we've been in Boston for 3 generations. Victoria's smile was thin. Yes, your father was in construction, wasn't he? He owned a construction company, I corrected gently. He built it from the ground up and employed over 50 people before he retired. How industrious, she replied, in a tone that made it clear this was not a compliment. And your mother was a teacher at a public school, if I recall? Yes, elementary education. She loved working with children. Victoria turned to Daniel. Speaking of children, I was just discussing with the Caldwells how difficult it must be for career women to adjust when they have children. Their daughter, in-law, was quite established in her career, but has found motherhood much more fulfilling. The implication was obvious. Victoria was already planning my exit from professional life once grandchildren arrived, assuming I would even be permitted to remain in the family that long. Actually, I said carefully. I plan to continue my translation work after we have children. The flexibility of freelance work is one of its advantages. Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly. How modern. Though I always found that children benefit tremendously from a mother's undivided attention. Don't you agree, Grace? Grace, who had a nanny for each of her 3 children, nodded solemnly. Absolutely. Children need stability and consistency. I took a sip of wine to avoid responding, and Victoria immediately pounced. Daniel mentioned you've chosen rather unconventional flowers for the wedding. What was it again? Garden roses instead of traditional lilies or orchids? Yes, I've always loved garden roses. They're less formal, but have such character and fragrance. Character, Victoria repeated, as if the word tasted strange. Well, I suppose every bride has her own vision. Though I must say, when James and I married, the cathedral was filled with the most exquisite arrangements of white lilies and orchids. People still mention how elegant everything was. As she reached across the table to emphasize her point, Victoria's arm knocked over her wine glass, sending red wine cascading directly onto my navy dress. I gasped, jumping up as the cold liquid soaked through to my skin. Oh my goodness, how clumsy of me, Victoria exclaimed, though she made no move to help. Grace, show Ivy to the powder room so she can clean up. Daniel finally broke his strange silence. Are you okay, Ivy? Just wet, I replied, dabbing at the spreading stain with my napkin. I don't think it's ruined. That's a relief, Victoria said. Though perhaps for tomorrow, we should ensure we have a backup dress, just in case of any last-minute accidents. Grace led me to a powder room where she handed me a towel with obvious reluctance. Try not to get anything on the hand towels. They're antique linen. I'll be careful, I promised, fighting to maintain my composure. Through the door, I could hear Victoria and Daniel talking, though I couldn't make out their words. When I returned, my dress bearing a visible pink stain despite my best efforts, the main course was being served. Victoria had apparently moved on to criticizing our wedding plans directly. I still don't understand why you chose that venue when the country club has hosted Bennett weddings for generations, she was saying to Daniel. And a buffet, instead of a formal sit-down dinner, seems so casual. Ivy and I wanted something that reflected both of us, Daniel replied, though his defense sounded rehearsed and weak. Well, I suppose everyone has different standards, Victoria said with a pointed look at my stained dress. Though I was rather surprised at your choice of officiant. Pastor Williams has been the family's spiritual advisor for decades. Judge Rodriguez is a mentor of mine, I explained. She's been incredibly supportive of my career, and it meant a lot to have her perform the ceremony. A civil ceremony, Victoria sighed. So brief and impersonal. When Grace married Thomas, the traditional service lasted nearly 2 hours. It felt properly significant. Throughout the meal, Victoria continued her campaign of subtle digs and not so subtle criticisms. Everything from our honeymoon destination, Greece in June, so touristy and hot, to our new apartment, charming that you're starting in such a cozy place, came under fire. Daniel remained largely silent, occasionally offering weak defenses, but mostly allowing his mother to dominate the conversation. With each passing minute, my disappointment in his passivity grew. This was the man who was supposed to stand beside me tomorrow and promise to be my partner for life, yet he couldn't even stand up to his mother for one dinner. After the main course, Victoria rose. I have something special to show you before dessert. She disappeared briefly, returning with a small velvet box. Daniel mentioned that you were going to use my grandmother's ring tomorrow for the ceremony. My heart sank. Daniel's grandmother's ring had been one of the few Bennett family traditions I had genuinely appreciated. The vintage diamond, in its simple platinum setting, was elegant and meaningful, connecting us to family history in a way that felt authentic rather than pretentious. I took the liberty of having it reset, Victoria announced, opening the box to reveal a completely different ring. The original diamond was now surrounded by an ornate halo of smaller stones, set in a heavily embellished band that bore no resemblance to the classic piece I had fallen in love with. For safekeeping, she added, though her eyes conveyed the real message, she had deliberately altered something precious to remove any trace of my preference or involvement. It's very different, I managed to say, looking to Daniel for support. He cleared his throat. Mom, we had agreed to keep Grandma's ring as it was. Darling, it was so outdated, Victoria replied dismissively. And the setting was worn. This preserves the stone, but makes it worthy of a Bennett bride. The implication that I wasn't worthy of the original rang clear as crystal. I felt something shift inside me, a growing resolve, replacing the desire to please this woman who would never accept me. As dessert was served, Victoria began showing wedding photos from Daniel's parents' ceremony. Look at the family resemblance between Daniel and his father, she said, pointing out features. The Bennett jawline is so distinctive. And Grace has my mother's eyes exactly. Her focus on genetic traits felt like another reminder that I would never truly belong in this bloodline. But it was when conversation turned to our honeymoon that I realized how far Victoria's interference extended. I took the liberty of speaking with my friend who owns that lovely villa in Tuscany, she said casually. He can accommodate you next week if you'd prefer to change your plans from Greece. So much more private and refined. You tried to change our honeymoon? I asked, unable to hide my shock. I made an alternative option available, Victoria corrected. Greece will be unbearably hot and crowded with tourists. I thought you might appreciate something more exclusive. Before I could respond, Victoria turned to the butler. Thomas, please bring up the Brunello we've been saving for special occasions. As Thomas left to fetch the wine, Victoria switched to Italian, speaking to Daniel in rapid, fluent sentences. I kept my expression neutral as she said, Figlio mio, sei sicuro di questa scelta? Ashley sarebbe stata una moglie molto più adatta. My son, are you sure about this choice? Ashley would have made a much more suitable wife. Daniel laughed nervously, responding in the same language. Madre per favor. È troppo tardi per questa conversazione. Mother, please. It's too late for this conversation. Victoria continued in Italian, unaware that, as a translator specializing in Romance languages, I understood every word. Non è mai troppo tardi fino a quando non dici, sì, lo voglio. Ashley sarà presente domani. Potrebbe essere un segno. It's never too late until you say, I do. Ashley will be there tomorrow. It might be a sign. What shocked me more than Victoria's words was Daniel's response. A laugh and a shrug, rather than a defense of our relationship or a shutdown of his mother's inappropriate suggestions. Thomas returned with the wine, and Victoria raised her glass in a toast. To new beginnings and family traditions, she said in English, her eyes conveying a very different message than her words. I sipped the expensive wine, thinking of the anonymous warning text, and wondering if the new beginning Victoria had in mind involved the end of my relationship with Daniel. As dinner finally concluded, Victoria suggested we move to the living room for coffee. The evening had stretched into a 3-hour ordeal of veiled insults and passive-aggressive comments, and I was emotionally exhausted. Daniel had become increasingly withdrawn, responding to his mother in monosyllables and avoiding eye contact with me. In the living room, Victoria directed me to sit on an antique settee that was beautiful but painfully uncomfortable, while she took a plush armchair opposite. Grace perched on the arm of her mother's chair, a united front against the interloper. I have some thoughts about the wedding toast, Victoria announced. I've taken the liberty of noting a few family anecdotes that might be appropriate for James to share. I forced a smile. That's thoughtful, but we've already discussed the toasts with our wedding planner. My friend Tara will speak first, followed by Daniel's best man, then my father, and finally, a brief word from Daniel and me. Victoria's expression hardened. I wasn't aware that your father would be speaking, and surely there should be a place for James to offer paternal wisdom. Dad is walking Ivy down the aisle and giving a toast, Daniel finally interjected. We finalized the schedule weeks ago. Victoria pursed her lips. I see. Well, I suppose modern weddings have different priorities. Grace jumped in. Mother spent weeks working on James's speech. It's about the responsibilities of marriage and carrying on the Bennett legacy. Perhaps he could share those thoughts at the rehearsal dinner? I suggested, knowing full well that the rehearsal dinner had been the previous night. Victoria's smile was glacial. How unfortunate that no one thought to include us in these important decisions. The guilt trip might have worked earlier in our relationship, but after everything I'd witnessed tonight, I found myself increasingly immune to Victoria's manipulations. More coffee? She offered, ringing a small silver bell for the butler. As Thomas refreshed our cups, Victoria once again shifted to Italian. Questa ragazza non capisce la nostra famiglia o le nostre tradizioni. È testarda e chiaramente non adatta a te. This girl doesn't understand our family or our traditions. She's stubborn and clearly unsuitable for you. Daniel sighed. Madre, ti prego di smetterla. Mother, please stop. Victoria continued as if he hadn't spoken. Ho parlato con il prete stamattina. Ci sono modi per invalidare la cerimonia se cambi idea. I spoke with the priest this morning. There are ways to invalidate the ceremony if you change your mind. My cup froze halfway to my lips. Victoria had actually spoken to someone about preventing our marriage from being legally recognized. This went beyond mere disapproval into active sabotage. Grace joined the Italian conversation. Il suo vestito probabilmente verrà dal centro commerciale. La famiglia non ha gusto. Her dress probably came from the mall. Her family has no taste. Daniel laughed uncomfortably, not contradicting either of them or defending me. Victoria raised her coffee cup in another toast, this time speaking in Italian. Alla famiglia Bennett, che rimarrà forte e pura nonostante le complicazioni temporanee. To the Bennett family, which will remain strong and pure despite temporary complications. As Daniel and Grace clinked cups with Victoria, I felt a cold clarity wash over me. I wasn't just marrying Daniel tomorrow. I was agreeing to a lifetime of being the outsider, the complication in the perfect Bennett family portrait. And based on his behavior tonight, Daniel wouldn't be standing beside me, but with them, united against me by blood and tradition. Victoria's next comment, still in Italian, pushed me past my breaking point. Ho preparato un assegno se vuoi offrirle di posticipare o cancellare il matrimonio. Ogni donna ha il suo prezzo. I've prepared a check if you want to offer her to postpone or cancel the wedding. Every woman has her price. In that moment, I understood that Victoria wasn't just hoping our marriage would fail. She was actively working to ensure it never happened at all. She had invited Ashley to the wedding, tried to change every detail we'd planned, spoken to the priest about invalidation, and was now suggesting paying me off like a problem to be solved with money. Most painful of all was Daniel's continued silence, his nervous laughter in response to his mother's cruelty, his complete failure to stand up for me or our relationship. As Victoria continued her Italian commentary, growing bolder with each unchallenged insult, she casually mentioned, Ho già parlato con padre Michael di possibili modi per invalidare la cerimonia. Ha suggerito alcune irregolarità con i documenti potrebbero essere sufficienti. I've already spoken with Father Michael about possible ways to invalidate the ceremony. He suggested some irregularities with the documentation might be sufficient. The calculated nature of her plans stunned me. This wasn't just a mother's disapproval, it was a strategic campaign to prevent her son from marrying someone she deemed unworthy. As the Italian conversation continued, with Grace eagerly contributing her own criticisms of my dress, my family, and our wedding choices, I sat silently, sipping my coffee and coming to terms with what I needed to do. Not just for tonight, but for the rest of my life. Victoria's final Italian comment was directed at Grace. Domani sarà interessante. Ho qualche sorpresa pianificata. Tomorrow will be interesting. I have some surprises planned. Whatever surprises Victoria had in store, I had no intention of being blindsided by them. 24 hours before I was supposed to say I do, I found myself at a crossroads that would determine not just my wedding day, but every day that followed. Setting down my coffee cup, I looked directly at Victoria and smiled. It was time. "Thank you for a lovely evening," I said in English, my voice steady despite the emotional turmoil inside me. "I think it's time for me to head home. Tomorrow will be a busy day." Victoria's smile was triumphant. She clearly believed her plan was working, that her continuous undermining had left me defeated and uncertain about the wedding. "Of course, dear. You must need your beauty rest," she replied, the double meaning unmistakable. Daniel finally seemed to notice my distress. "I'll walk you out, Ivy." As I stood, I did something unexpected. I turned to Victoria and gently took her hand in mine. Her fingers were cold and stiff, with surprise at the contact. "Prima di andarmene," I began in perfect Italian, watching shock register on her face. "Vorrei ringraziarla per avermi mostrato così chiaramente chi è veramente." Before I leave, I would like to thank you for showing me so clearly who you really are. Victoria's face drained of color. "You speak Italian," she whispered in English, pulling her hand away as if burned. "Fluently," I confirmed, continuing in Italian. "Sono una traduttrice professionista, specializzata in lingue romanze. Ho capito ogni parola che ha detto stasera." I am a professional translator, specializing in romance languages. I understood every word you said tonight. The room fell silent. Grace's smug expression faltered, and Daniel looked horrified as the realization dawned that I had understood all of their Italian conversations throughout the evening. Still in Italian, I addressed Victoria directly. "Ho sentito I suoi tentativi di cambiare I nostri piani per il matrimonio. Ho visto il messaggio che conferma la presenza di Ashley domani. E ora so che ha parlato con il prete di invalidare la nostra cerimonia. I heard your attempts to change our wedding plans. I saw the message confirming Ashley's attendance tomorrow, and now I know you spoke with the priest about invalidating our ceremony." Switching to English for Daniel's benefit, I continued, "I also know that you've prepared a check to bribe me into canceling our wedding, because apparently every woman has her price. Is that correct, Victoria?" Victoria's shock was quickly replaced by indignation. "I was merely discussing contingencies with my family. Surely you understand a mother's concern for her son's future." "What I understand," I replied calmly, "is that you've spent this entire evening, and apparently months before, actively trying to sabotage our relationship." I turned to Daniel, whose face had gone pale. "And what I find most heartbreaking isn't your mother's behavior, which has been consistently hostile since we met. It's that you sat here all night, listening to her insult me in what you thought was a language I couldn't understand, and you didn't defend me once. You laughed along, Daniel." "Ivy, I didn't mean," he began. "You laughed," I repeated. "When she said Ashley would be a better wife, when she criticized my family, when she called me stubborn and unsuitable. Not once did you tell her to stop or say that you chose me because you love me." Victoria recovered quickly, her social training taking over. "I think we're all a bit tired and emotional. Perhaps we should continue this conversation tomorrow when everyone is fresher." "No," I said firmly. "We'll finish it now. I've spent 2 years trying to earn your approval, Victoria. I've been polite when you were rude, patient when you were difficult, and understanding when you were cruel. I did it because I loved Daniel and wanted to be part of this family. But tonight has shown me that was never going to happen, because you never intended to accept me." I turned back to Daniel. "And you've shown me that when pushed to choose between standing up for me and pleasing your mother, you'll choose her every time. That's not fair, Daniel protested weakly. It's complicated. It's actually very simple, I replied. Marriage is a partnership. If you can't be my partner against something as obvious as your mother's disrespect, how will you be my partner through the real challenges life will bring? Victoria stood, her composure cracking slightly. You're being dramatic. This is exactly the kind of emotional volatility I've been concerned about. No, Victoria. This is clarity, and I have you to thank for it. I looked around at the three of them, Victoria, with her cold calculation, Grace with her smug superiority, and Daniel with his weak indecision. I came here tonight hoping to find some common ground before the wedding. Instead, I found a family united in their conviction that I don't belong. Ivy, please, Daniel said, reaching for my hand. Let's talk about this privately. I stepped back. We should have talked privately weeks ago, when your mother first started changing our wedding plans behind our backs. We should have talked when you let her criticize me at every family gathering. But you chose silence then, just like you chose silence tonight. Victoria's voice hardened. This is exactly why I've had reservations about this match. You clearly don't understand our family dynamics or Daniel's position. What I understand, I replied, is that you invited your son's ex-girlfriend to our wedding without telling us. You tried to change our flowers to something my best friend is allergic to. You spoke with a priest about ways to invalidate our marriage, and you prepared a bribe to offer me. Are those the family dynamics I'm supposed to accept? Daniel looked stunned. Mom, is that true? Did you really talk to Father Michael about invalidating the ceremony? For the first time that evening, Victoria seemed genuinely uncomfortable. I was simply exploring options. A mother must be thorough. Thorough, I repeated. Is that what you call systematically trying to destroy our relationship? Grace interjected. You're twisting everything. Mother only wants what's best for Daniel. No, I said firmly. What's best for Daniel is allowing him to make his own choices and respecting them. What's best for Daniel is supporting his happiness, not enforcing your vision of what his life should be. I looked at Daniel directly. The question is whether you're willing to make those choices for yourself, or if you'll continue letting your mother decide what's best for you. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken tensions and years of family dynamics I was only beginning to fully comprehend. Daniel looked torn, caught between the woman he claimed to love and the family that had shaped his entire identity. I love you, Ivy, he said finally, but you have to understand, my family is important to you. I know that, I finished for him. I've never asked you to choose between them and me. All I've asked is that you stand beside me as my partner, that you defend me when I'm disrespected, and that you honor the commitments we make together. Victoria's voice was cold. This conversation has become unnecessarily dramatic. Perhaps it would be best if you left now, as you suggested earlier. I agree, I said, surprising her. But before I go, I want to be very clear about something. I looked directly at Victoria. I came here tonight as a courtesy, because despite everything, I was still trying to build a relationship with you for Daniel's sake. That ends now. Whatever happens tomorrow, whether Daniel and I get married or not, I will never again put myself in a position to be disrespected by you. To Daniel, I added, I'm going home. You have until tomorrow morning to decide what kind of man you want to be, one who stands on his own and makes his own choices, or one who lets his mother dictate his life, because I will only marry the first kind. As I turned to leave, Victoria called after me in Italian, one final attempt to have the last word. Se te ne vai così, stai solo dimostrando che non sei abbastanza forte per questa famiglia. If you leave like this, you're only proving you're not strong enough for this family. I paused at the doorway and replied in the same language. Al contrario. Me ne vado perché sono abbastanza forte da non accettare di essere trattata in questo modo, nemmeno per amore. On the contrary, I'm leaving because I'm strong enough not to accept being treated this way, even for love. With that, I walked out of the Bennett estate, not looking back to see if Daniel followed. The night air felt cleansing after hours in Victoria's suffocating presence. As I reached my car, I realized my hands were shaking, not from fear or sadness, but from a strange sense of liberation. Whatever happened tomorrow, I had finally stood up for myself, and that, I realized, was a victory no one could take away from me. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and racing thoughts. By the time I reached Daniel's apartment, our apartment, theoretically I had moved through shock and anger into a strange, calm clarity. The signs had always been there, but tonight had stripped away the last of my illusions about the Bennett family and my place in their world. I unlocked the door, half expecting to find Daniel already there, having rushed to beat me home and make amends. The apartment was dark and silent. Of course he hadn't followed me. He was probably still at the estate, letting his mother soothe his conscience with assurances that I was being unreasonable, that I would calm down, that everything would proceed as planned tomorrow. Except, I wasn't sure anything would proceed as planned anymore. I kicked off my heels and sank onto the couch, surrounded by packed boxes labeled for our new life together. My phone buzzed with a text from Tara. "How did it go?" Instead of responding, I called her. "That bad?" she answered immediately. "Worse," I said. And the entire story spilled out the insults in Italian, Daniel's silence, Victoria's machinations with the priest, the invitation to Ashley, the check she'd prepared to bribe me. When I finished, Tara was quiet for a long moment. "Ivy, I love you, but I need to ask, do you really want to marry into this family tomorrow?" The question hung in the air, and I realized I didn't have an immediate answer. "I want to marry Daniel," I said finally. "The Daniel I thought I knew. The one who stood up for himself and respected me as an equal partner. But after tonight, I'm not sure that Daniel exists." "He exists," Tara replied thoughtfully. "He just might not be strong enough to break free from his mother's control." We talked for another hour, discussing options and scenarios. Tara offered to come over, but I needed space to think. By the time we hung up, it was past midnight, and Daniel still hadn't returned or called. I tried his cell, but it went straight to voicemail. "Daniel, it's me. We need to talk before tomorrow. Please call me when you get this." Sleep seemed impossible, so I made tea and sat by the window, watching the city lights and thinking about the past 3 years. Had I missed the warning signs? Had I been so in love that I'd willfully ignored the red flags about Daniel's relationship with his family? Around 2 in the morning, I heard a key in the lock. Daniel entered quietly, looking exhausted. He froze when he saw me sitting in the dim light of the living room. "You're still up," he said unnecessarily. "Obviously, we need to talk." He sighed, dropping his keys on the table. "Can it wait until morning?" "I'm exhausted." "Our wedding is in 10 hours, Daniel. If we're going to have this conversation at all, it needs to be now." He sank into the chair across from me, loosening his tie. "I'm sorry about tonight. My mother can be difficult." "Difficult?" I repeated incredulously. "Daniel, she's actively trying to stop our wedding. She invited your ex-girlfriend without telling us. She spoke to a priest about invalidating our marriage. She prepared a bribe to offer me to walk away." "She's protective," he said weakly. "She wants what's best for me." "And you don't think that's me?" "I didn't say that. You didn't have to. You sat there all night while she insulted me in Italian, and you laughed along. Not once did you defend me or our relationship." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd seen countless times. "You don't understand how complicated it is with my family." "Then help me understand," I challenged. "Explain to me why you let your mother treat me like an unwelcome intruder. Explain why you didn't tell me she invited Ashley to our wedding. Explain why you've allowed her to go behind our backs, changing wedding details we agreed on." "She's always been the one in charge," he said after a long pause. My whole life, it's been easier to go along with what she wants than to fight her. She always wins in the end anyway. So that's it? You've just accepted that your mother will control your life forever? What about us, Daniel? What about our future together? We'll figure it out, he said vaguely. Once we're married, things will settle down. I shook my head in disbelief. No, they won't. Tonight made that very clear. If anything, her interference will get worse. She'll try to control where we live, when we have children, how we raise them. And based on tonight, you'll let her. That's not fair. Isn't it? Tell me honestly, Daniel. If your mother had succeeded in changing our wedding flowers to lilies, knowing Tara is severely allergic, would you have stood firm and changed them back? His hesitation told me everything I needed to know. You can't marry someone and expect them to accept being treated like this, I said quietly. I won't be the outsider in my own marriage, constantly fighting for basic respect while you stand on the sidelines. What are you saying? His voice was wary. I'm saying I need to know where you stand. Not just with words, but with actions. If we get married tomorrow, I need to know you're marrying me, because you choose me, not because it was easier than standing up to your mother. Daniel was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was small. I do choose you, Ivy. I love you. Then prove it, I said. Call your mother right now and tell her that Ashley is not welcome at our wedding. Tell her that if she can't respect me and our relationship, then she shouldn't come either. His face paled. You can't ask me to ban my mother from my own wedding. I'm not. I'm asking you to set boundaries with someone who has shown she doesn't respect them. I'm asking you to stand up for us. It's the middle of the night, he protested. Fine. First thing in the morning then. But it has to be before the ceremony. Daniel stood and paced the small living room. You're putting me in an impossible position. No, Daniel. Your mother put you in this position by refusing to accept your choice of partner. I'm just asking you to finally make a real choice. He looked at me with something like desperation. Can't we just get through tomorrow and figure this out afterward? Once we're married, it will be too late, I interrupted. I need to know now whether you're capable of putting our relationship first. The silence stretched between us, filled with all the words he couldn't or wouldn't say. I need some air, he said finally, heading for the door. Daniel, it's 3 a.m. I just need to think. As the door closed behind him, I wondered if I'd just ended my own engagement. The thought brought both terror and a strange sense of peace. Whatever happened tomorrow, at least I would know where I stood. I must have fallen asleep on the couch, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the windows and my phone was ringing. It was Tara. It's your wedding day, bride. To be. Unless, are we still doing this? I looked around the apartment. No sign of Daniel having returned. I honestly don't know. Well, I'm coming over with coffee and bagels, and we can figure it out together. 30 minutes later, Tara arrived with breakfast and moral support. We were halfway through our coffees when my phone rang again. It was Daniel. Where are you? I asked immediately. At my parents' house, he replied, his voice strained. I needed to talk to them. My heart sank. And? I told my mother that Ashley isn't welcome at the wedding. I told her that she needs to respect my choice to marry you, or she can stay home. I almost dropped my phone in shock. You did? It didn't go well, he continued. She cried. My father yelled. Grace called me ungrateful, but I stood my ground. Daniel, I'm not finished, he interrupted. I also told them that going forward, they need to treat you with respect. No more criticism, no more undermining, no more speaking Italian to exclude you. And I apologized for not doing this sooner. You were right, Ivy. I should have stood up to them a long time ago. Tears pricked at my eyes. What did they say? My mother said I'll regret throwing away my family for someone I barely know. I told her I've known you well enough for 3 years to be certain you're the person I want to build my life with. Then, I left. Where are you now? I asked, my heart pounding. On my way home. To you. If, if, if you still want to marry me today. I looked at Tara, who was watching me with wide eyes. Did you mean what you said to them? About putting us first? Every word, Daniel said firmly. I should have said it a long time ago. I was weak and afraid of rocking the boat. But last night, seeing you walk out, realizing I might lose you, it forced me to face who I've been and who I want to be. And I want to be a man worthy of your love, Ivy. I'll see you when you get home, I said softly. We have a wedding to prepare for. As I hung up, Tara grinned at me. So, I guess we're still on? We're still on, I confirmed, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. But with one significant change to the guest list. The rest of the morning was a whirlwind of preparation. When Daniel arrived, we had a long, honest conversation about boundaries, expectations, and how we would handle his family going forward. For the first time, I felt like we were truly partners, facing life's challenges together, rather than as adversaries on opposite sides. As I slipped into my wedding dress later that day, not from a mall, as Grace had sneered, but a beautifully simple gown from a boutique owned by one of my translation clients, I thought about Victoria's words. Every woman has her price. She had been right about one thing. I did have a price for marrying into the Bennett family. It wasn't money or status or acceptance. It was respect. And today, Daniel had finally paid it. The wedding was everything we had planned. Simple, elegant, and deeply personal. Judge Rodriguez performed the ceremony with warmth and humor. Tara stood beside me as my maid of honor, beaming with pride. The garden roses filled the venue with their sweet fragrance, and none of our guests suffered allergic reactions. Victoria and James Bennett were notably absent, as was Ashley. Grace attended with her husband but kept her distance, watching the proceedings with an unreadable expression. As Daniel and I exchanged vows, I saw something new in his eyes, a certainty and strength that had been missing before. When he said, "I do," his voice was clear and firm, without a trace of hesitation. The reception was filled with laughter, dancing, and genuine joy. My parents, who had always treated Daniel with warmth despite Victoria's coldness toward them, made a point of telling him he would always have family in them. "We're gaining a son today, not losing a daughter," my father said during his toast, his voice thick with emotion. As the evening wound down and we prepared to leave for our honeymoon in Greece, as we had planned, Daniel pulled me aside. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, looking nervous for the first time that day. My heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" "My mother called while you were getting your hair done. She wanted to apologize." I raised an eyebrow skeptically. Victoria Bennett apologized? Well, in her way, Daniel admitted. She said she may have overstepped, and that she hopes we can move forward as a family. She asked if they could come to the wedding after all. What did you tell her? I told her it was too late for today, but that if she's sincere about respecting our marriage, we can try to rebuild the relationship slowly, on our terms. I squeezed his hand. "I'm proud of you." I also told her something else, he continued. I said that you were the strongest, most intelligent, most compassionate woman I've ever known, and that she missed the opportunity to welcome an incredible person into the family. Tears welled in my eyes. "Daniel, it's true," he said simply. "You showed me what real strength looks like. Not dominating others or always getting your way, but standing up for yourself and what's right, even when it's hard." 6 months later, we were settling into our new life together. Our apartment was fully unpacked. My translation business was thriving, and Daniel had been promoted at his architecture firm. We had established a comfortable rhythm as a married couple, learning to navigate minor disagreements and celebrate small victories together. Relations with the Bennett family remained complicated. Victoria had made several attempts to reassert control, each met with firm but polite boundaries from Daniel. After the third canceled dinner due to her behavior, she seemed to finally understand that the old dynamic was gone forever. When we were invited to the Bennett estate for Thanksgiving, I was understandably apprehensive. Daniel assured me we could leave at any time if things became uncomfortable. To my surprise, Victoria greeted me with something approaching genuine warmth. The dinner wasn't perfect. Old habits die hard, and there were a few tense moments, but it was a vast improvement from the disastrous evening before our wedding. As we were preparing to leave, Victoria asked to speak with me privately. Daniel looked concerned, but I nodded that it was okay. In her immaculate study, Victoria seemed uncharacteristically uncertain. "I owe you an apology, Ivy," she said finally. "My behavior before your wedding was inexcusable." I waited, not making it easier for her. "I've always been protective of my family," she continued. "Perhaps too protective. I convinced myself I knew what was best for Daniel, but I was wrong." "Why the change of heart?" I asked. "Because I've never seen my son as happy as he's been these past 6 months," she admitted. "And because I realized I was at risk of losing him completely if I didn't change." "It's not just about Daniel," I said quietly. "It's about basic respect for me as a person, and for our marriage." Victoria nodded. "I understand that now. I won't pretend it's been easy to adjust my thinking, but I am trying." She hesitated. "And I want you to know that I've come to respect your strength. Not many people would have had the courage to stand up to me the way you did." I thought about how far we'd all come since that night. It wasn't about courage, Victoria. It was about self-worth. I knew I deserved better than to be treated as an outsider in my own marriage. "You were right," she acknowledged. "And Daniel deserved better than to be caught between us." As we rejoined the others, Daniel looked at me questioningly. I smiled reassuringly, taking his hand in mine. On the drive home, I told him about Victoria's apology. "Do you think she means it?" he asked. "I think she's trying," I replied. "And that's a start. But what matters most is that we're solid, regardless of what anyone else thinks or does." Daniel squeezed my hand. "That night before our wedding, when you stood up to my entire family in perfect Italian, that's when I knew for certain I was marrying the right woman." I laughed. "Not before then?" "I always knew I loved you," he said seriously. "But that night, I realized I admired you too. You showed me what it means to have real courage." As we pulled up to our apartment building, I thought about the lesson I'd learned through that painful experience. True love requires not just affection, but respect, honesty, and the courage to stand up for yourself and your relationship, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. The day before our wedding, when Victoria had spoken Italian to exclude me, she had inadvertently given me the perfect opportunity to reveal my strength. Her attempt to undermine me had instead empowered me to set boundaries that ultimately strengthened our marriage. Sometimes, the challenges that threaten to break us are the very ones that make us unbreakable. And sometimes, the words meant to hurt us become the catalyst for our greatest moments of courage. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself to protect your relationship? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a reminder of their own worth. Thank you for listening, and remember you deserve respect in every relationship in your life.